Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Fitness Experiment podcast. This week, Jesse and I are talking about my experiment, Chett, my experiment with the Carnivore Diet. So all I've been eating for nearly 2 weeks now is animal foods. So no veggies, no fruits, no nuts or seeds, no breads, just animal foods. So it's a really radical way of eating, obviously. But we're going to talk about how and why people are using this and why so many people are finding benefits from it. Personally, spoiler alert, one of the biggest things I've noticed is this crazy increase in daily energy, and it's just there all day long. You're completely satiated all day long. You don't have cravings. You don't have hunger. The gut feels amazing. And we talk about all of this in this episode. We also share some of the stories of other people on the socials or on the web that are sharing their success with this particular way of eating. This holds true especially for those with autoimmune issues, so those people that have high levels of inflammation, because the quote-unquote diet just helps to massively reduce our overall inflammation. And again, we get into how and why that is. We also talk about the other side of this, so some potential nutrient deficiencies that could creep up if people aren't careful eating this way. And then we also dig into another really interesting concept that doesn't get discussed very often. So this idea of plant toxins, actually. So these are essentially compounds within plants that are defense mechanisms. But when we consume these can trigger an immune inflammatory response. And again, this is just another reason why some people are finding so much success with this way of eating. I'm sure you have 1,000 questions right now because this is such a paradigm shifting concept. It is totally radical. I agree. And we're going to answer all your questions in this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. So please, if you do like it, if you have any questions, send them our way. And if you like this episode, share it with others. Giving us a review also goes a long way. We would really, really appreciate it. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We had a couple weeks there where we had some guests on, and then today Jesse and I have another hot topic for you. And we're in studio today too. So
yeah,
this is fun.
Yeah, our buddy Adam at London Music Conservatory let us use his drum room to record. So, and then also drop some knowledge about sound and things that we don't know, but it's going to start sounding better and better every week from here on out. We got some pretty solid help.
Yeah, so huge thank you to Adam for having us in here. This is wicked space. And also, I think we need to say a huge just shout out and thank you to people who have been maybe new listeners tuning in as of late. We were kind of just checking out the couple episodes in particular as of late that we recorded. Like the Game Changers one has just been going up and up and up. And it seems like still like the past couple of days, it's been increasing. So huge thank you to everyone tuning in, listening to that one. And I hope that, that one too, I hope that, people do take a good listen to that one and maybe, I guess, like adopt maybe more of like a critical mindset around some of those documentaries, especially the ones about nutrition and health and that type of thing. And so, I hope people get some value out of that one. We've had some amazing feedback so far. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway is what you said there, the critical thinking aspect of watching anything or learning anything. You're getting information secondhand from somebody who got that information from somebody else. And you don't know where the motivation came from to create whatever got created. So being skeptical is super valuable to increasing your knowledge and increasing just kind of like the wavelength that you're on from being a consumer, because you have a responsibility as a consumer to sift through all the bullshit and make sure that what you're taking in and what you're applying to what you do every day is actually going to be beneficial for you. Yeah. And experimenting with things, knowing that you might end up being wrong, and that might seem like you're kind of wasting time. So say you listen to the Game Changers documentary and it inspired you to eat more of a plant-based diet, and you try it and you experience XYZ, it doesn't matter positive or negative. That's kind of our whole premise of this whole thing that we're doing here, is like, that's part of the whole fitness experiment, right? Like that's good. And you tried it, and whatever came out of it. And we're not here to say that it's wrong or right, because especially from an experience standpoint, like if you're actually in there experimenting with different fitness routines or different diets, and in this case for the Game Changers it's a plant-based, then you're gaining knowledge, and it's practical knowledge and stuff that you can back up with how you felt, and whether or not it was right for you or not. So I think it's fun, it's cool. And I know you've been experimenting the last couple of weeks with kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, so I'm curious and interested to get into that and see how that went.
I'll get into that for sure. But I think that's a hell of a point, and I totally agree. I'm happy you brought that up. It's definitely like, even if you feel some negative side effects or symptoms from something, whether it be like a diet or anything else, that's a damn good point, is that it's not a waste of time by any means. It's just a learning experience, and that's what life is. So yeah, that's sweet. I like it.
I think when documentaries like these come out too, it's people will take it and now like that's the be all end all. So it turns into, we kind of touched on in the past how diet and nutrition can turn into a religion-like obsession very quickly. Really identify as one thing or the other, but it doesn't have to be like that. It can be an experiment to find what works best for you in your life and your function.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I think so let me put it this way, like when it comes to nutrition, diet, whatever, I think there's always a lot of room for interpretation, right? To kind of summarize. But I think one thing that always holds true 100% of the time, one thing that I like thinking about is I don't think a diet should be, and I don't even like that word, I've said that before, but I don't think a diet should be like just this or that. I think we need to think of nutrition and quote unquote diets more as existing along a continuum. So like, you don't have to be or like identify with like, I'm keto, I'm carnivore, I'm plant-based, I'm vegetarian or vegan. It's like, if you want, sure, but who really cares? Like, you can have a little bit from both. So that's part A, is it should exist along a continuum. Reason being is because B, nutrition is so individualized. There's things that work for some people that are absolutely terrible for others. And so that just kind of supports point A, is along a continuum, because people are going to optimize their health at different points along that continuum. So I think that's a maybe good thing for people to just keep in mind if you ever feel overwhelmed or stressed or whatever with all the nutrition info out there, have a hard time maybe deciding what path to go down or what way to eat. Just think that like, you don't have to be an all or none person. You can kind of pick different parts from each and figure out what works for you. And hopefully that's another one of our goals with this podcast, I think, is helping people figure out maybe what works best for them.
Yeah. Did you have any debunking left?
Excuse me. So not really like right off the top, like I certainly do, but I think for now it'd be better if we, like you said, talk about kind of like the other side of things.
Sure.
And then I'm sure it will kind of lead us back into the Game Changers stuff.
Okay, cool.
Because I just feel like I don't want to overdo it. Like, yes, there's certainly still some things left in there that we haven't discussed, but I think there's some other people out there who have done a great job of identifying what some of those other ones were. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we'll probably end up coming back to that anyways.
Yeah, don't want to beat a dead horse anyway.
Yeah.
You definitely proved your point in that first and just opened the eyes to the stuff that was left out. So let's get into your little experiment that you did then. So when did you start? You you started the carnivore diet, so you went the opposite end of the spectrum.
Totally.
What is that?
Yeah. So I started this last Monday. So today we're going to release this today. This is Wednesday. I started this a week ago, Monday. So carnivore diet, for those people who haven't heard of it, is kind of just as it sounds, is eating only animal products, I should say. I was going to say animal meats, but there's kind of more to it than that. But so yeah, eating only animal meats and other animal foods. So what does that include? So you're eating beef, you're eating chicken, turkey. You can have fish. You can do it with or without dairy. For the most part, I did it with dairy. So I had some cheese, mostly goat cheese. You can have eggs. You can have organ meats is another big part of it. So I tried to have a bunch of like liver. I had a little bit of kidney. What else? If I'm missing anything, that's the bulk of it. So, I mean, if you think about what that is, where you get it from, all of that you're obtaining from animals, right? So this is the crazy part to most people, zero vegetables. I always struggle with that word. I don't know what it is. Zero veggies, zero fruits, zero grains, zero wheat, zero nuts and seeds. I don't know, whatever else people eat, there's none of that. So to give you an example day of my eating, it would be breakfast was usually something like I would have 3 to 4 egg yolks. So I'll maybe get into this later on, but I would cut the egg whites off and just have the yolks. That was for the most part to try and limit my protein intake. I don't want to confuse people, but we'll come back to that. Often I would have that with like a ribeye steak. Sometimes I would have some liver alongside that. That was the typical breakfast. Lunch was usually some fish. So I would have like maybe some salmon or some mackerel. Yeah, that was usually always my go-to, was some type of fish. And then dinner was tended to vary a little bit. There was usually some more beef in there. Sometimes I would have another ribeye steak actually, but I kind of got sick of the ribeyes a little bit. I think more so because I have I have really big gaps at the back of my mouth that I should get fixed, but just haven't. Like from when I got my wisdom teeth taken out, I have big gaps back there. And when I eat steak, sometimes it would get stuck in there and it does hurt sometimes. So I think that was one of the things that kind of deterred me from having more ribeye, because it is, I mean, it's delicious. Obviously I love the taste, but I didn't always have that twice a day, but sometimes. What else would I have at dinner sometimes? Maybe some chicken thighs. So thighs tend to be the fattiest. Yeah, I can't really think of what else, to be honest. It was, like I said, it was usually some type of beef, whether that be like a roast, a steak. Maybe I'd throw some chicken in there. I honestly can't think of what else, but that was the bulk of it.
Yeah, it's pretty bare bones.
It is really, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so the other thing I should mention is what's called beef suet. So it's pure fat. The macros. So if you have, I forget how many grams you would need, but hypothetically, let's say like 100 grams, that's just a random number, but within 100 grams, you'd be getting and again, I don't remember the exact conversion, but it would be 100% fat. So it would be like, 100 grams of fat, 0 grams of protein, 0 grams of carbohydrates. So it is pure fat.
Yeah.
It's often I think they say it's often the fat around, and this was beef, sorry, it's the fat around kidneys, I believe. And they usually just throw it out. I actually asked my mom about this the other day. She grew up on a farm. She said they used to feed it to the dogs.
Oh yeah.
Where I got it from, and shout out to Greenbrook Farms, which is where I got all of my beef from. So this is grass-fed, and Dion mentioned this. It's same provider, grass-fed, grass-finished. I got the suet from them, and same thing. Like he said, between them and the butcher, they usually just throw it out because people don't want it. People have heard of tallow. You can render it to make tallow, but sometimes I would fry it up a little bit in the pan, or I've even started just eating it raw lately. So the reason I would include that is just because it was hard to get enough calories in. And so that would really bump up the calories, and especially it would bump up the fats. But like another thing before I kind of proceed, and I'm sure there's listeners probably have 1,000 questions already in response to what I just said, but the kind of the optimal way to do this quote unquote diet is what's called a nose to tail. So the suet's actually a good example. Like this is normally something we throw out, but you are including this on that diet if possible. Things like liver, kidney, even other organ meats like heart, whatever it is. Like, again, the best way to do it is to actually include those. And that's because those are the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, like period. I think I mentioned this on the show before, but if you look at carnivores in the wild, whether it be like foxes, wolves, et cetera, when they take down an animal, the first thing they go for, so especially if it's a smaller hunter, the first thing they go for is the organ meats. Whereas nowadays we eat muscle meat, right? The second thing they'll go for is fat, which we also often throw away. They'll leave the muscle meat for last. So we're kind of doing things backwards. And maybe we can get into some of the specific vitamins and minerals that are in those organ meats. But to do it the right way, you should include all of these. There's some people out there who do it by literally only eating, say, like 80% of the time ribeye steaks. I have no idea how they do it and how they don't develop deficiencies.
Right.
But the diet in general, I should just one last thing I should mention before I rant too much is people are probably wondering, like, what about the veggies? What about the fruits? Like, isn't that bad for you? Like, what about all the nutrients in those? Well, that's actually where a lot of the benefit of this way of eating comes from, is by removing these veggies and fruits and nuts and seeds and grains and all of that. But so I'll just try and simplify this as much as possible. But so veggies and fruits especially, but also nuts and seeds, they all have these individual compounds in them that are immunogenic. So what that means is when you consume them, they can stimulate our immune system. And for at least, a lot of people, that will trigger inflammation. And so the group of people who are benefiting from this way of eating the most are people with autoimmune issues. So these are people who their inflammation is already sky high, right? That's what makes an autoimmune disease is that their inflammation is like out of control. So these people all of a sudden remove all these immunogenic compounds that are from veggies, fruits, nuts, and seeds. And this just like totally reduces their inflammation. And then oftentimes they will, drastically improve their symptoms, but also like sometimes reverse or quote unquote cure whatever they have. And so that's kind of one of the biggest benefits of this way of eating. And then just one last thing. So kind of one of the people who popularized this way of eating, her name's Michaela Peterson. And if you ever listen to her story, it's pretty wild. Like she used to have like terrible arthritis throughout her entire body. Like from the age of like 10 or 12 onward, she had severe depression, severe anxiety. Her guts were destroyed. And basically over the years, from the age of, I think, say like 12 to like mid 20s, she gradually started eliminating more and more foods until finally she got down to a meat-only diet, carnivore diet. And it wasn't until she was at that point where her depression was gone, her anxiety was gone, her arthritis was gone, and she just literally felt like a new person. And so there's a lot of stories coming out about people like that. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Big question about what you were just talking about is how would eliminating certain foods be able to have an effect on your brain like that?
Yeah. So the easiest way to answer that is there's connections from your gut to your brain. That's very well known nowadays. There's kind of like 4 different ways for those signals to actually get there. But I think without kind of going into each of those right now is, I think the best one, which is also probably the easiest way to explain this, is something called your vagus nerve. So this is a nerve that literally goes from your digestive system, also from your organs, up to your brain. And it will carry signals of all kinds, including inflammatory signals. So if you have inflammation of the gut, it will carry those pro-inflammatory signals literally from your gut to your brain, and then it will cause like a secondary inflammatory response within the brain. So when I did my master's, that was like literally what I studied, was like, and of course, yeah, we used mice, but the mechanisms we were studying are like well conserved across all mammals. Like it's the same mechanism, is that if you stimulate so we would literally just inject them with like something called OPS. The purpose of that would be to stimulate a huge inflammatory response. So like within the GI region, and then we would say, okay, when we give them this inflammatory response, like how and when does that actually travel into the brain? And that's very, very well known, as if there's inflammation in even just like the rest of your body, it will get into your brain because there is that direct connection. So if you think about like the foods we eat, obviously the first point of contact is the gut, but yeah, like if that food doesn't agree with us for whatever reason, that can trigger an inflammatory response throughout the rest of the body, and that will immediately go to the brain. And we know that things like anxiety, depression, all of that are significantly worsened with higher levels of inflammation. So there's definitely some other ways that it can get there, but I think just kind of like in simple terms, that would be the most common, really.
Now, the difference between, or I guess the benefit to adding in organ meats compared to just eating muscle meat all the time, what would be?
Yeah. The B vitamins, especially, some of the B vitamins. So like organ meats tend to be, they're really, really high in, I always forget the individual ones, really high in folate, especially, which is B9, if I'm remembering correctly. And B12, I think, is the other one. I have to double check those, but they are, if I'm getting those correct, those are, if you look at like foods that are the highest in these, those are like sky high in organ meats compared to other ones. But honestly, like, it's all of them really. Like you could go down the list of like, all the B vitamins, maybe it's iron's obviously no issue. You're getting tons of that. But even things like ones people don't think of, like a manganese, for example, or like a riboflavin, or what's another one, like zinc or magnesium, or there's a long list where if you're not eating the organ meats and you're only eating the muscle meat, you're just simply not going to get these. So like the most common, there's a couple that often pop up. So when people hear the carnivore diet, there's a couple of common nutrients that pop up where people go, like alarm bells kind of go off, and people go, well, you're not going to get enough of this one. Vitamin C is a big one.
Right.
So, which is kind of a fair argument. So vitamin C deficiency is what causes scurvy. So if people have ever read, you hear these stories about kind of like hundreds of years ago, sailors coming over from Europe, they would get scurvy because they would not consume any vitamin C. All of a sudden you give them a little bit of vitamin C, like it doesn't take much. I think to prevent scurvy, you need like 10 milligrams per day, I think, which is very small amount. Like if you take one capsule of supplemental vitamin C, that's 1,000 milligrams. So to prevent scurvy, 10 milligrams. So where can you get that? So it's high in adrenal glands, for one, which they're the organs that we have that basically help us deal with stress. So there's these stories from the Inuit they're 100% carnivore. So to kind of learn more about this diet, you can read about previous populations who are eating this way. And it's very well known that they would every once in a while eat adrenal glands to prevent scurvy. So that's one way. And And that's the major one, to be honest. But the other thing is that, so for one, it doesn't seem like you need a lot of vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Okay, there's that. But is that like quote unquote optimal?
Right. Yeah.
So probably not. Maybe you need a little bit more. But again, you can probably get this from maybe eating that adrenal every once in a while. Maybe you do need to supplement it every once in a while, but I know a lot of people would say that you don't. But I think the other like big thing here is that when you're not taking in a lot of sugar, a lot of glucose, you just don't need as much vitamin C. So there's kind of like some emerging research right now suggesting that your kind of like required amount of vitamin C that you need to consume when you're, again, not eating these carbs, not eating these glucose, not consuming this glucose or sugar, is like drastically reduced. And I can't really right now explain the details as to why that is. I need to learn more about it, but it's really interesting. And I mean, the other thing is, so that's kind of like the scientific research side of things. But if you look at like anecdotal evidence, so people that have been eating this way for several years by now, they'll say that they literally never get sick, like no colds, no flu, no infections. And if we look at vitamin C, it's important for the immune system, right? So you would think like, well, if they're not getting enough vitamin C, but shouldn't they be getting sick all the time? Well, they're just not. So like something's going on there,
right,
that still needs to be figured out.
Yeah. Would that be tied back to lower levels of like global inflammation too?
I think so. Yeah. I think more so inflammation too, but I think more so like oxidative stress, which is kind of like, it's kind of similar to inflammation, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. And so vitamin E kind of goes into the same category in some sense, in terms of like, people think that that's another one you may not get enough of. And that's another one that's really important for the immune system, dealing with inflammation, oxidative stress, et cetera, et cetera. But this one, people, again, who have been eating this way for long periods of time, they'll do full lab works to see what vitamins and minerals and what levels they're at. And vitamin E is like sky high. So it's bizarre.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk about it, I feel like the question for people listening would be, we grow up and your mom's like, eat your vegetables because you need your vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
But what you're mentioning is that these vitamins and minerals are also present in specific meat and animal products as well. Yeah. Would there be a benefit to getting the vitamins from one or the other, or does your body not know the difference?
Yeah, there definitely is. And I think this kind of goes back, this will definitely tie into the game changers a little bit. I can't even remember now, like what specifics we talked about. So hopefully I don't repeat myself, but on average, the vitamins and minerals are more bioavailable in these animal sources compared to the plant options. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So that's another like shocker, right?
Yeah.
Like mind blowing. So there's a few reasons why that is. For one, if you look at a few of the individual vitamins or minerals, so vitamin A is one, which I'm pretty sure we did talk about last time, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe go back and listen to this part, but I talked about the whole beta-carotene versus retinol thing.
Right.
So I'll just quickly kind of recite that. So you would get vitamin A from a plant source in the form of beta-carotene, for example. You can get it other ways, but that's one. Our body has to convert that into retinol in order to actually use it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we're getting vitamin A from something like beef, it's already in retinol, and that's how we use it. So it's already in that form. Mm-hmm. There's a couple other examples of vitamins and minerals that behave the same way. Panthenoic acid, I think, is one of the other ones, so the B vitamins, they all have like names like this, and I always forget which is which, but panthenoic acid, which I think it's B4 or B5, I think. But anyways, that's another one that behaves the exact same way. like we have to convert the plant source into another usable source. And if we get it from animals, it's already there. So that's one thing. But the biggest thing is something called lectins. Maybe people have heard of this. So like lectins and phytates are the big ones. So these are more compounds found in plants, especially. So these are mostly the ones I was referring to earlier on when I said they have some immunogenic compounds. So phytates and lectins are the big ones. So just think of these as like, they're like just sticky proteins kind of. We consume them and they stick to like sugars. So what the hell does that actually mean? Basically what it means is that it blocks the absorption of the individual vitamins and minerals that are in that food that we're consuming it from. So to give you an example, let's say we're consuming Brazil nuts to get zinc. So that value that's shown on the ingredients label, maybe it says this has 20 milligrams of zinc per serving. Mm-hmm. When we consume that, we're not getting anywhere near what it says because of these lectins and phytates, because they just block the absorption. It's just what they do. Why are these there? It's because these plants don't want to be eaten. So these are defense systems. Yeah. It's wild, right? Like that's why I find this so bloody interesting.
And that's also why, like, when people say like this is like a moral thing with like the compassion stuff for animals over plants, I'm like, plants communicate and have defense mechanisms and things. It just doesn't look or sound or feel the same as ours. And it's, I'll let you keep going. This stuff is so interesting to me. It blows my mind.
I can definitely say this is something I'm going to be digging into consistently for the next like several months. Cause this was kind of like this was like a paradigm shifting thing for me. Like if you would have talked to me or even go back to some of our earlier episodes, I probably would have been saying like, get your 6 to 8 cups of veggies per day. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that you were wrong then. It's just now your knowledge has expanded into this whole other realm.
Yeah. So that's why they're there, is just defense mechanisms.
The plants don't want to be eaten.
Yeah. That's kind of this. Yeah.
And I mean,
as simple as it is.
When you look at it, it's like, well, that didn't really do anything for the plant because it still got eaten. Yeah. However, those are built-in mechanisms that it has to try to, I kind of think of it this way. Like if an animal we were to eat that plant, but we don't get the nourishment that our body actually needs from that plant because of these, it doesn't necessarily help that individual plant, but it could potentially deter something from wanting to eat more of.
Totally. Like its brother.
Yeah. Like I forget where I saw this, but it was about a specific tree in Africa. When a giraffe would start eating the lower leaves, it would release a chemical that made it taste different, and it would be bitter to the giraffe, and then would deter them. So like those leaves got sacrificed, but the whole tree was able to survive because it released these chemicals. I don't know if it was a smell or a taste. Doesn't
probably
matter.
A bit of both.
Some sort of defense mechanism to deter the giraffe from continuing to eat that tree, and it would move on to the next tree. Yeah. It would get a couple leaves, but then the same thing would happen.
So
crazy.
Yeah. So there's a few crazy things to that point more that I just thought of. So I don't want to forget these. So the first thing is, let me say this first. So one of the other wild things is, so let's just picture a plant for a sec. You kind of have, in general, you kind of have like your stem, and then you have your leaves, and at the bottom you have your roots and your seeds, right? So it seems like the highest levels of these, and not just lectins and phytates, like there's a lot of other compounds we probably won't get into. We can just kind of summarize them as plant chemicals or plant stress chemicals. So usually there will be some in the leaves, some in the stem, and then the most are in the seeds of the plant. Because if you think about it, they get some leaves eaten, they're probably okay. They get some of their stem eaten, they're probably battling, but might be okay. You eat those seeds, it's toast. And so they're most highly concentrated in that seed area, which is like most important to them, right? That like, it's so crazy.
Yeah. Well, stuff you don't even think about, like watermelon seeds, they taste like shit. You don't eat those.
Yeah.
If you eat an apple core, but you get a bite of that seed, disgusting.
And there is something in the seeds of apples. I read this the other day that's like a legit toxin. I forget what it is, but so yeah, just don't even eat those. And then the other thing is, a lot of these chemicals within the plant are literally not created until that plant is pulled apart. So there's some, so how can I explain that? So there's, let's just say like XYZ. So let's say this plant has nutrient X and Y. It has the ability to create Z, but when the plant is intact, Z or Z is not there. Something bites into that plant, it has a chemical reaction, and it creates Z in that piece of the plant that was bitten off because it's being pulled apart and chewed. It responds to being bit off by creating a toxin.
Right.
It's insane.
So saying that's not like that's essentially, it's an emotional response. It's like fighting back in a different way. A plant can't bite you or cry or hit, or run away. So it's viewed as something different, which is very confused. Humans are weird. We have a weird way of being compassionate with things.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's a little different. But so these phytates and
phytates is one, lectins. And then if anyone's heard of so here's the crazy thing, and this would be a definite counter argument, is that, what about like polyphenols, antioxidants? Like, I thought these things were good for us. Sulforaphane is one that's incredibly popular right now. And these all kind of go into that same category. So, and that's obviously a counter argument as well. The argument is, well, what about hormesis? Like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Like, exercise is bad for us, but it's then good for us. So that's a definite counter argument. Is that, well, maybe we can adapt to these and become, stronger and fitter and have greater longevity by consuming these. I personally haven't really come to a conclusion on that yet. It probably take me a long time to do so. But again, I think you just have to kind of look at some of the anecdotal evidence again when it comes to answering this question. Like, can we adapt to these and become stronger? I don't know. Why are people feeling so much better when they remove them? But then another argument, well, maybe some people have the ability to adapt to these and maybe others don't.
Right.
The other thing is, so if you listen to like some of the geekier podcasts about this topic, which I love doing, they'll talk about the existing research on like why polyphenols, why antioxidants are good for us. And they'll say that, okay, yes, some of the research will show that it's beneficial for us in certain aspects, but they'll claim that they totally ignore like the flip side. So they'll basically claim that when people do research on these antioxidants, they are looking solely for the benefit of that antioxidant, and they don't even look at the potential side effects or the risks.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's one that kind of still needs to be unpacked a little bit more. But again, like anecdotally, like, why do people feel better? I mean, even if I just give myself as an example, like I would have, if I was benefiting from these, I would have felt that, right? Because like I used to crush like, big ass salads on the daily. Like I would have a little bit of everything. Spinach, arugula, peppers, cauliflower, it didn't matter. I tried to get as many veggies in as possible. So, and I did this consistently over a long period of time. So you'd think I would have adapted. So then why now when I've removed them, do I feel so much better in terms of like my daily energy has noticeably improved, mostly just in terms of like being consistent all day long. Another thing, and this is one thing I've talked about on my kind of some of the socials lately, is I had this thing in my knee for probably like the last 2 or 3 months. It would come and go, but for the most part, like it would hurt quite a bit coming out of the bottom of a squat. Probably 75% of the time it was there. There'd be the odd day where maybe it felt a little bit better, but it would always take like 30, 40 minutes until it started feeling better. An inflammation thing, it wasn't an issue. And now in only a little over a week, I'm all of a sudden at like 3 or 4 consistent days where like I haven't even been wearing my knee sleeves sometimes because it's just like, it's just gone. So like, why is that? I mean, maybe there's some other things going on, sure, but I haven't really changed anything other than removing all of these. So I like, there's something to it, right? Like why so many people just feel better.
Let's go, since we're onto it, let's go over the changes that you've noticed in the last week and a half, because we haven't really touched on that too much.
So like I said, the energy thing has been probably the biggest. And I should kind of clarify, when I say energy, this is more so physical energy in the gym's different. I think we'll at least leave that till later on in this discussion because that's a different issue. But the mental energy has been like I said, drastically, noticeably improved. Like 0 crashes throughout the day whatsoever, whether I drink coffee or not. Some days, and I did this several times last week, I would eat like 2 meals a day and just be like totally satiated, like wouldn't even think about food. And that's not really a normal thing for me. So there was that. The inflammation thing, like I mentioned. I guess before I go on to the gut thing, because that's the biggest thing I noticed. But I was going to say, like, you can notice inflammation in a lot of ways. I think people don't maybe really realize this. So there's the joint things. I think how you wake up first thing in the morning is another good indicator. Like if you feel just like, if your body feels sore and stiff, that's an inflammation thing. Obviously, like your ability to recover from training is another example. Like brain fog can be another example. How you deal with like stress, anxiety, that type of thing. So it's a long, long list. But so what about the gut thing? Because this was another, and I can't believe I almost totally forgot about this. But so I've said this before. I used to have like pretty bad gas. Like, I don't know, like 75% of the week or 75% of the days of the week, probably like end of the night after dinner, I'm like ripping farts for like the majority of the night, right?
Yeah.
And I always kind of, and I've had this for a long, long time, and I always kind of thought it was just like, whatever, it's normal, you know? And the more I've gotten into this stuff in the past, like several months, maybe the last couple of years, I just kind of finally realized like, I don't think this is normal. Like when it's going on, like the gut doesn't feel good. Like they smell sometimes just terrible. Like something is going on here. Like that's not a normal thing, right? So ever since when I started removing these, like I said, all these veggies, plants, nuts and seeds, etc., which I did before I went full blown carnivore, but I noticed a huge benefit to that just from doing that. And then in the past like week plus, I've probably farted like 0 times. It's like, it's ridiculous, which I think is also very counterintuitive to what people think.
Yeah.
Because when I first threw this out there, people were like, sorry, Keeks, you're going to have to deal with a bunch of gas, right?
Yeah, because you're eating all that fat.
That's what people think.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The other thing I should say is, again, there's a lot of things I noticed with the gut. I can eat a massive meal, like 1,200 to 1,500 calories of like a ribeye, egg yolks, organ meats, whatever, feel really full, look in the mirror, and you wouldn't know that I just ate. It's really strange. Like you don't get bloated at all. Like obviously you eat a carb heavy meal. You look in the mirror after the meal versus before. I mean, right? Obviously, like you not only feel that, but you look in the mirror and it just looks like it
Got a good
looks
load
full,
on.
right?
Yeah.
Which, yeah, okay, I'm full.
Yeah.
So we always, like, as humans, whatever, would have thought like, oh yeah, like that's just kind of what happens when you're full. But then I did this and it's like, well, what the hell? Like, so there was that. And then just like the digestion. Yeah. Like, not that digestion was ever really an issue for me. It was more so just like in the hours afterwards. But yeah, that's the other thing, is like the digestion is just perfect. I mean, you just don't notice anything. Like you don't get any, and again, I never had any heartburn or anything like that, but there's absolutely none of that. Like, you don't feel tired afterwards from quote unquote having to break down all this hard protein to break down. Like there's none of that.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
So yeah, because that's kind of like when people, so Christmas dinners or whatever, and you're all tired afterwards and people blame it on the turkey, but really it's just the fact that they crushed all these carbs.
Yeah.
And they're just their body's trying to figure out what the hell to do with all this excess.
Exactly.
So this isn't actually that big of a nutrition topic as of like the last few years, but there was a time where like fiber was something that everyone was talking about.
You brought that up. Yeah.
So it's like Fiber One bars and like added fiber to these cereals. So cereals, if you ever want to know like what the big trend is in nutrition and what the fad is, just look at what they're advertising on the cereal box, because they always touch on it. It's either low fat,
that's true,
high fiber, fill in the gap. Whatever is popular right now, they'll somehow manage to package it into the marketing scheme on a cereal box, something that I've noticed. So I think a question that somebody would have would be like, well, what about my fiber? Like, isn't that important for digestion?
That's a hell of a good question. That's what I was going to bring up next. And then the other thing you should remind me to touch on before the end of this one, if I forget, is, because I realized I haven't even mentioned it yet, is like basically how carnivore is also ketogenic.
Okay.
It's like no carbs. So I think people need to know that too.
I'll make a note here so I don't forget.
Yeah, the fiber. This is another thing that I 100% absolutely need to dig into more. But again, there's lots of anecdotal evidence. I've been trying it myself. So anyways, it seems like, and this is totally shocking and paradigm shifting as well, but it seems like fiber, the way we think of it anyways, is not necessary. So, and again, some of these people who kind of really geek out on this, who have done a deep dive into the literature on this specific topic, which I fully admit I still need to do when it comes to the fiber idea, they'll say that based on the research, it's just not conclusive that we actually need fiber in our diet. So there's actually studies out there that show that in terms of like different GI issues, there's some data out there that shows that when we do increase our fiber intake, it actually worsens things. And the tricky thing about this, like, people are probably going like, well, what the hell? Like, how do we trust the research? Well, no, it's just because these are like, they're more association studies, right? Mm-hmm. Which we talked about last time. So go back and look at that. But there are these studies that, and this is what makes nutrition so bloody confusing, but they're associations. So they're sometimes they're asking people how much fiber you've eaten in the past year, say. So then they go, okay, well, group A tended to eat more fiber, group B tended to eat less fiber. Who did better in terms of health? Again, you can't say that was specifically due to the fiber. Like, what else were they doing in their life? Mm-hmm. Now
who the fuck is going to remember how much fiber?
Well, yeah, exactly. And like, that's so ridiculous. But there is some other ones too that will give like a specific fiber intervention. Like, they'll say, all right, folks, keep eating just the same way you've been eating, but we're just going to give you this fiber supplement or whatever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, again, I need to do a dive, but some people say that there's enough research showing that it actually goes the other way around. But I think so that's kind of confusing, but let's just kind of simplify this as best as possible. I think this will kind of clear it up for people. And this was actually just someone who I never even met them. It's someone who messaged me on Instagram the other day who I've kind of just been chatting with, and they've been doing the carnivore diet for like the last several years.
Oh, wow.
And they were one of the people who, one of these stories who had like these ridiculous benefits to autoimmune issues from a carnivore, and they just stay put now. They stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually that person who said, well, you know, I kind of just think of fiber as like something that pushes carbs through all those, I kind of think of fiber as something that just pushes all those carbs through our kind of inner pipes.
Mm.
And I don't know, I just kind of like the way that sounds. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think even if you look in terms of like mechanistically, I think there is a lot of truth to that statement. Because if you think about like these animal foods, like they're so bioavailable, right? It's like we're going to absorb and utilize a huge majority of that. And so I don't think we just probably don't need as much of that fiber to push that stuff through. So that's one thing. I think it's important to also note like the whole gut microbiome thing,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I'm sure a lot of people think that it's good for your microbiome,
That's
et
a big
cetera,
thing.
et cetera.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that we just don't know enough about the microbiome to make any conclusions, really. I mean, even the statement, this is a common one people always hear, I think, is you want a diverse gut bacteria, right? People always say that. Well, what does that even mean? And like, why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just, and this, like, if you actually look at the existing research on something like this, like it is so bloody complex and not understood whatsoever that we, like I said, I just don't think we can make any conclusions at all about this right now. So fiber being good for like your microbiome, like, well, I really don't think we really know the answer to that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another example, I think, in my opinion, where you have to look at some anecdotal evidence to kind of maybe form a little bit of a judgment on that right now. And then in terms of like, I guess like bowel movements, this is another funny one. I don't know if it's that I haven't fully adapted to this yet, but my schedule on that has just totally changed. In fact, if I think about it right now, like I don't think I've deuced in like, no, I did have one this morning, but I didn't the day before. And I think the day before that, it was like very small. So again, I don't know if people have been doing this for a long time. They say that part does need to go through like a little bit of an adjustment before that becomes regular again. But as I say that, like, I don't feel, like I said earlier, I don't feel backed up. I don't feel bloated. I don't feel constipated. Usually if someone is constipated, you can usually see it in their gut.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I have that right now. In fact, I think I've had a little bit like of a reduction down there. So I don't know. That's another thing that I'm just going to keep my eyes peeled for and see what happens.
Yeah. Cool.
But I think just in general, like I said, the gut microbiome and all that, I think we just still need to learn more about it. One thing I will say is some of our savvy listeners out there have maybe heard about short chain fatty acids maybe in the gut. So it looks like having more of these short chain fatty acids in the gut could be beneficial for health. So things like, and again, this is for the people who are kind of digging into this, they've maybe heard of this, but things like butyrate is one, or propionate, or there's a couple others. And so this is one of the arguments that people have to support the whole like plants for gut diversity thing and whatnot, is they say that they feed those short chain fatty acids, which these short chain fatty acids they do serve a purpose down there. I mean, I think they just kind of like help deal with bacteria down there and kind of help just like clean things out. But the funny thing or the cool thing is we can make these from the amino acids found in meat. So this was something I just read. I thought, like, that's ridiculous. We can also make them from, I took a note on this. Where is it? We can make them from collagen as well as the other one. And then where is that? There was one other mechanism I think that I didn't mention. I can't find it. But anyways, so we can make these from like proteins we're getting from meat. So I don't know, that just kind of like, it just seems like thus far, whenever there's a counter argument, there always seems to be an answer.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Keto and carnivore?
Oh yeah, thanks. So carnivore is, it's a ketogenic diet also, just because if you're only eating meat, you're not getting any carbs.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is. Like, so when I did that, if I included goat cheese, which I did a couple days, I think my daily total carbohydrates was like 11 grams, which for people listening, that would be like 11 grams. It'd be like a handful of berries. So like the average person, if you're eating like a standard diet and you're having, let's say you're having like one piece of bread a day, you're having 2 pieces of fruit, you're having maybe some rice or something at dinner, like you're probably easily around like 250 grams of carbs.
Mm-hmm.
So just by nature, carnivore diet is also ketogenic because you're not consuming any carbs. And so your body just flips into burning fats and flips into ketosis. So that's where a bunch of the other benefits of carnivore diet come from. Is there's kind of like 2 sides. It's like you're benefiting from being in ketosis because we know that has, hundreds of benefits that we probably won't have time in this episode to talk about. So that's kind of part 1A or A. And then the other side is what we talked about, is the removal of stuff. And so, yeah, so that's, I guess, now to kind of get up to date with my current experiment.
Yeah.
Which is because I've kind of just like adapted it now. So I'm going to stick with, as best I can, this carnivore diet. But I'll do like a couple times a week. I haven't really decided yet. I'm going to do kind of like a little bit of a carb refeed. So a couple times a week, I'll have like some sweet potatoes, like some berries, maybe some raw honey, whatever. So just to kind of restock that glycogen. So the reason I'm doing this is basically what I'm going to try and do is stay in ketosis as much as possible, except for literally like during my workouts. So I'll have like a little bit of carbohydrates immediately before my workout. It'll be, and we'll talk about the details of that later, but a little bit of carbs right before my workout is kind of like to provide a little bit of energy from sugar, right? I basically burn through that during my workout, and then I bounce right back into keto after the workout. So it's, they call this like a targeted keto, it's called. Because classical keto, you would have like your daily consumption would be like on average 30 grams of carbs. So I'm trying to do it by having daily probably like 60 grams of carbs. And then a couple times a week, I'll have like maybe 200 to 300. But even when I do that, the goal is that the next morning you're still back in ketosis. So the idea being is that like I'm burning through so much of this so fast that my body just uses it up and then it goes right back into keto. So you're trying to get the best of both worlds. It's like I'm trying to reap all the benefits of ketosis, which is like insulin sensitivity, stable blood sugar, reduction in inflammation, et cetera, but I'm kind of having this small dose of carbs during my workout because we know that at certain intensities, you need that.
Cool.
So some people would call this like CrossFit sabotage, which it totally could be. Like most people would look at that and say, you're crazy. And it is kind of crazy because CrossFit is like if there's one sport where you need carbohydrates, it's probably CrossFit. So that's
what run an experiment to see if you
debunk
that or find another way.
Yeah, basically kind of like try and Jimmy rig it and find another way.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Without those added carbs, how do you notice your performance during your training when you're...
So it's too early to say because I was on a deload week last week, so volume was noticeably lower.
Save that one for another day then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So today, I would call today, no, I guess this was kind of like the second workout of the week where I've kind of like officially implemented this. The other day, I can't say because I sleep the night prior for other reasons. I had to get up early and coach, and I had a crap sleep the night before. I slept like 3 hours. So I can't really say that workout if it was the sleep or this, but today I tried this again. I had 0 carbs yesterday. So I was 100% carnivore yesterday. Today, carnivore breakfast, had probably like 40 grams of carbs pre-workout today. Felt honestly unreal during training today. And then didn't have any carbs post-workout, measured my ketones post-workout, and I was back into like, I would say like marginal ketosis. So my ketones were 0.2, which would be kind of like, you're getting there. You're not quite there yet. You want to be like 0.5, say like 0.5 to 1.0 to be like definitely there. But based on that, it seemed like I did it right. I burnt through that, and then I was back into keto or on my way there post-workout and felt great. So I don't know. We'll see how things go, but it's
just keep experimenting.
So
yeah.
I was very torn about this for a few days when I was trying to decide whether or not to do this. But then I just thought, like, what am I going to do for longer? What am I going to make a career out of or make money from? I'm not going to the games. I'm not an athlete. Right. I'm a scientist before an athlete, right? Technically. I like to do both, but so what's the worst that can happen? Like 2 or 3 weeks, I do this for 2-3 weeks. I feel like total garbage, whatever. Then I'll just eat carbs again. Like, who cares?
It's the whole part of the experiment. And I think like that's the takeaway for everyone. Like that's what it is all about. You need to try different things.
Yeah.
If what you're doing right now isn't working, then keeping and doing it isn't going to work any better than what it is right now. So might as well try different stuff. And you're more than willing to be your own guinea pig. So
definitely.
I guess we'll check in on this in a couple weeks.
Yeah. And I'm going to do my best to kind of post it on the socials as much as I can.
Yeah. So just at Brain Ignition.
Yeah.
To follow along. Because your stories like every day.
Yeah.
Posting stuff about it. So
try to. It can be time consuming, but I do hear from people and say they find it really, really interesting. So, and why wouldn't you? It's like, look what this idiot's doing.
Yeah.
So, that's a wrap.
Yeah, let's check in next week.
Yeah, if you guys do a weekly check-in, let us know. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I'm sure you still have 100+ questions about this radical, weird way of eating in this experiment in general. We're definitely going to have to revisit this topic. I find it so interesting, though. I'm going to definitely keep digging into this so that we can bring you guys more content around this. We have a bunch of cool stuff coming up for you guys. Next week, we'll talk about training versus competition. So this idea that you need to earn the right to compete. So this holds true in especially functional fitness, but also other sports too. So if you want to compete, you need to make sacrifices. You need to dedicate yourself to the off-season training. You cannot be going off track, following another program in addition to yours. You cannot be participating in other competitions, burning yourself out. We also have some more guests coming up. Some in the cannabis space, the entrepreneurial space. We'll have an episode for you guys before Christmas on holiday hacks. So that includes nutrition, lifestyle, what to do, how to navigate the holidays. Otherwise, if you guys like this episode, please share it with others. We'd be really thankful if you did that. That goes a long way in pushing us up those rankings, if you will, and getting this out to more people. That's it. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great week.